Lorain County Commissioners' General Meeting. Unless otherwise announced, meetings are held Thursday mornings at 9:30 at the Lorain County Administration Building, 226 Middle Avenue, 4th floor, downtown Elyria. These are public meetings, and as always, you are invited to attend.
Under appointments at 10 o'clock, Lorain Soil and Water Conservation District, the request for funds for county ditch program, and 3 p.m. Planning Commission and public hearing room. Under resolutions, job and family services bills,
So moved. Second.
discussion. Ms. Vacy?
Aye.
Ms. Blair?
Aye.
Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Investments,
So moved. Second.
discussions. Ms. Blair?
Aye.
Ms. Vacy?
Aye.
Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Appropriations,
So moved. Second.
discussion. Ms. Blair?
Aye.
Ms. Vacy?
Aye.
Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Transfers,
So moved. Second.
discussion. Ms. Blair?
Aye.
Ms. Vacy?
Aye.
Mr. Moore?
Aye.
There are no advances or repayments. Requisitions,
So moved. Second.
discussion. Ms. Blair?
Aye.
Ms. Vacy?
Aye, with the exception of 1252 to 1256.
Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Travel expenses,
So moved. Second.
discussion. Ms. Vacy?
Aye.
Ms. Blair?
Aye.
Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Bills,
So moved. Second.
discussion. Ms. Blair?
Aye.
Ms. Vacy?
Aye.
Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Authorize various personnel actions as indicated on the summary for employees within the jurisdiction of Lorain County Board of Commissioners.
Commissioners, I'd like to request a executive session for the express purpose of discussing potential new hires and some grievances that need resolution. And those are allowable issues under the Sunshine Law.
Under the airport, number 10, accept the airport improvement project grant from the FAA to improve runway 0726 safety area phase 1 as a co-sponsor in the amount of $2,233,333. The FAA share of the allowable project cost is 90% or $2,010,000 and the local matching share is 10% or $223,333 to be paid as soon as possible from account 001014901492605 allocations.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Vacy?
Aye.
Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Ms. Blair?
Aye.
Under the Commissioners, 11, approve Lorain County Board of Commissioners meeting minutes of June 5th, 12th, 17th, 2003, and waive the reading of the same.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. Ms. Vacy?
Aye.
Ms. Blair?
Aye.
Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Approve the allocations of various municipalities settlement for local government funds.
Jerry, I think you had some issues.
We received from attorneys Rich Goddard and Ryan Callender of Calfee, Halter, and Griswold a proposed alternative formula for the local government fund distributions. If you recall, about a month or so ago, we had set forth a proposal in which we agreed that county would pay $250,000 toward resolving the 2003 allocation, and also proposed to take a half of whatever increase Lorain received in the future. The numbers were calculated under the current figures that would allow a $640,000 increase. That would depend on what the allocation each year is. but it increases their percentage. We sent that out to the attorneys who were representing the litigants in the current lawsuit, and basically asked them to come up with a proposal that fits within those parameters. They have resubmitted a formula to us, which has the necessary approval of 17 of the other townships, municipalities, and villages other than Lorain and ourselves. If you will recall, there are 3 entities, the county, the city of Lorain being the largest, and the majority of all the other entities that need to approve that formula. That has been submitted to us, and they are asking us to now approve that formula. There is one basic change in it that does not fit exactly with what we had previously set forth, and that is this now proposes that the county would front the entire $500,000 that goes to Lorain this year for settling the 2003 suit. That would be repaid through the 2004 distribution, coming back to the county next year. A second little glitch to what I had set forth in the letter was our proposal suggested that be divvied among, that repayment be divvied among the litigants to the lawsuit. This proposal divvies it up amongst all the other entities, whether they were litigants or not litigants in that lawsuit. Another change is I had proposed that it be an up to a 10-year time period. This proposes to be a permanent formula. As you probably have read in the newspapers, it also does not allocate anything for Lorain County Metro Parks.
What are you saying? It's a permanent formula versus a 10-year formula?
Well, I think there was some discussion as to how long it should be. I believe, if I recall correctly in my letter, and this was just a suggestion that I had thrown out from talking with everyone, is I had suggested a 5 to 10 year time limit on it.
On what, Jerry, the payback?
No, on how long the formula.
Oh, the
would be.
formula?
My initial thinking was that when the census comes out every 10 years, that would be kind of the appropriate time to look at it. There was some discussion. Their proposal comes back to make it a permanent formula. I will tell you that from my discussions on with the experts, although there is no, the current status of the law seems to suggest that that may be something you can do. I have some reservations about whether you can indeed do a permanent formula. One, the law might change, and I suspect, I can't tell you that for sure whether that's possible or not, but I think you should know. I have my reservations that can be done.
So we're better off to go with a 5 or 10 year formula and then
Well, I'm not saying, I'm just
let it be
saying
reviewed?
this purports to last permanently. I'm not sure that end of it will be legally enforceable.
Yeah, but I thought if all the communities already signed on this, then how can we sit there and change it now?
Well,
It can't go right back.
that's the other end to consider. You have this in front of you. If you change it, then it has to go back to everybody and they have to pass another resolution
So
again.
So who changed it to a permanent? Because I think this board was told
The-
5 to 10, and
The original agreement, as you're as we sent out, was a proposal offer. The agreement that you have before you, it was developed and approved by the litigants in the case, by Mr. Goddard and the leadership of that group of individuals. They forwarded that around to the various townships, municipalities, and I believe they also forwarded a copy to Lorain, and they voted Jerry and Lorain on that, correct? And
That's my understanding,
And they
although...
sent a copy to us.
I haven't seen that yet. Is it in here?
Of course, the fact is, we only got 3 days to approve this, doesn't give us any leeway to send it back, so
Well,
that's nice.
yeah, I don't see the resolution.
They voted. We'll probably they did it.
Okay.
We'll get a copy.
My understanding is Lorain has voted and approved it. I have not physically seen their resolution yet.
It's accomplished. We'll make sure we get a copy of it. There's much fanfare down there when it was done. But some of the parameters that were changed slightly did not alter the fundamental funding principles of what the tolerance levels that the county put out there were.
Well, one of my tolerances was the 5 years.
For the review, you mean?
Yes. So,
So what do we actually have to vote on today?
what's in
I
front
thought
of
it
us,
was
that's
just the
it.
funding.
This is a copy, I
Well,
believe.
Commissioner, what you're voting on is just, it is the funding, but you're also voting that this formula does not have a automatic sunset clause or a renewal clause where people have to sit down and renew it. There is provisions under the code for that process, though. But I'm not going to try to mislead you and say that everybody's going to get in the room cooperatively and decide to redo this again anytime soon.
Okay, so what's the rush here?
We got till September 1st to do it, or it
Or
goes to
what?
the statutory formula, is that what it is?
That's right.
Well,
Is that my understanding? Or you guys don't want to have this discussion right now in public?
This has to go back to the Budget Commission,
All
and the
right.
Budget Commission has to approve it. There are some time restraints on that, and October 1st is the absolute drop-dead
October?
timeline on the thing.
Or it goes-
Because of the time limits that the Budget Commission has to work with, it was necessary to establish the September 1st deadline in order to get all these other resolutions in. So, I mean, I cannot say to this board it absolutely has to act today. But we are very rapidly running out of time.
When does the Budget Commission, when is the Budget,
Right.
sorry, when is the Budget Commission meeting next?
10th?
The 10th of
Eight.
September?
Eight.
Commissioners,
8th of September.
Commissioners, when we originally started this process, September 1st was the
Was the
absolute
actual
date. Subsequent to that, and while we were engaged in the process, we received a 30-day extension from the state on this issue. That came in within the, Craig, the last couple of weeks? The 30-day extension, couple weeks? Because it looked like that we may not be able to achieve September 1st, we were looking for a little wiggle room in the process. It wasn't necessary. The other activities were able to come to the table and get their majority, and Lorain was able to do their work. So that's why you have it before you today. But that extension wasn't available when we originally started this process and only has recently been granted to us.
Would you repeat that? I'm sorry, I wasn't paying entire attention. I'm trying to read this document and listen to.
At the time we circulated, the deadline was September 1st.
Okay, so what's,
We were able, the Budget Commission was able to obtain an extension to October 1st, but that didn't happen until, and we didn't know for sure whether it would happen that happened within the last couple of weeks. So we do now have till October 1st to get this done. But there are time restraints in there as far as the Budget Commission getting it, sending out a publication, the Budget Commission approving it, and we can't wait till September 28th to do this, especially if you're going to if you do modify it, understand what happens. It then has to go back out to all these entities, and they have to pass resolutions and get it back to us again. So, I mean, when you say, Commissioner, I'm not going to suggest to you that you absolutely have to do it today, but, you know, when you say, there is some rush. I mean, we cannot be fooling around with this.
We're at the last stop, that's all.
3 weeks down the line on this thing.
Is it the only concern in regards to the years, the formula? If it's going to be a permanent or a 5-year or 10-year, is that the only concern?
Well, that was my concern. Well, there was two changes you said, right? There was two.
What I have described to you is what are changes from what we originally proposed. I want to make it clear, Commissioner, that this is not my proposal. I have said numerous times I have various conflicts, so I have made some suggestions to try and get things moving along. There are some items in here that this would not be the formula that I would draft if I were doing it, to be honest with you. But I have conflicting interests.
Well,
That's not commenting whether this is good or bad.
I have to agree with you, because if the laws change, if something changes, there's no reviewing this if it's permanent.
Well,
But I mean, they can just come in and automatically review it, but there's nothing stating that it should be reviewed.
Correct.
What
There
is-
is a provision in the code for review.
Yeah.
And it's the same method that was used to adopt an alternative formula is the method used to modify, change, or unadopt the alternative formula.
But this is kind of what started the problem in the first place. So I think that if there's a date in there for this to be reviewed, then we won't have the problem in the future.
I have to indicate that I was told by the administration in Lorain that they were not agreeable to a date that
Oh,
it was going
really?
to get reviewed.
I'm agreeable to a date. Are you agreeable to a date?
Yes.
Are you agreeable to a date?
I'm flexible.
See, we're all flexible, but we're agreeable to a date. How's that?
No, I didn't say that. I said I was
Tried to work it
flexible.
that way.
It didn't come
Tried.
out that way.
But I would think that they would be the ones that would want a date in here, because...
No, they don't want a date in here. This guarantees their allotment. That's
Yeah,
why
but what
they
if
got
it changes and their allotment can
Exactly.
be
Well,
increased?
but let's just talk about that for a minute. You said it guarantees their allotment.
Okay.
They also have a, what's the word I'm looking for, Jerry? They can, if they don't accept this formula, and we do, and a majority of the other political subdivisions do, it doesn't go forward.
Correct.
It has to have 3 approvals. So they have
Correct.
veto powers, what I'm trying to say, over this matter, if in fact they choose to exercise
Commissioner,
it. The same as we do.
There was a couple parameters that Mr. Ennis rightfully pointed out to you that were things that we did not anticipate. One was the sharing of the $250,000 over more than just to name litigants. The second was the exception of an allocation to Metro Parks, albeit they were getting a very small allocation to begin with, and the timeframes on when there may be a sit-down to review the alternative formula. The dollar parameters that we discussed, everybody remained within those dollar parameters. Initially, our focus was on those parameters. Like anything else in the negotiation process, there's a little bit of give and take on each side of the table. I really can't tell you whether we'd be successful if we went back and tried to get timeframes put into this. I don't have an answer to that.
All right, and then we talked about $500,000, cutting a check for $500,000, and $250,000 of that was to be repaid. There's no dates on when the repayment's going to come back. There's no assurity that we're going to get that other $250,000 back. I mean, there's too many questions for me to really feel comfortable in voting on this today.
I think we already voted on the allotment today, didn't we? In the,
If you look at Section 1A of the agreement,
What page?
page 2.
Right here is 1A, and I think this is
Okay.
what he's talking
It says, the Budget Commission shall allocate to the county 43.302% of the funds plus $250,000 for the 2004 calendar year allocation and 43.302% of the funds for each calendar year thereafter. In my mind, that safely guarantees the county that they'll get $250,000. There is one area where there could be an exception to that. If the state does away totally with these funds, because we've seen them decreasing, or if we end up in a litigation that is successful in unwrapping this new alternative formula, it could be problematic. I believe the first one is probably not very probable in the short-term future, because I think that they're going to keep chipping away with those, but there will be funds available for the next few years. The second one, it's very subjective. There's been some threatened litigation. It may occur. I don't think it'll be successful, but you have to be made aware of that probability. I think that we have a reasonable, good assurance that we'll get that $250,000, but it's not 100%. I don't know that we could ever really get 100% absent them paying us before we voted on the formula.
Can I give you a hypothetical, Jerry? You want to talk about hypotheticals? What happens if we don't vote on it today, or because of or we want the wording changed from permanent to a time certain? That means
Well, what you run the risk if you change something and send it back to Lorain or the other subdivisions, and they are not agreeable to the change, and we run out of time, state formula goes into effect.
What happens at that point?
Well, a lot of that is questionable, because we have to analyze the figures in depth to see who wins and who loses under that formula.
Has someone
I
already
think
done
there
that,
would
or
be
no?
a risk. I've tried to get some estimates from the experts that we have talked to. They have indicated to me that the county itself is not likely to suffer any big losses. But again, that's really a guesstimate at this point. If you go into the state formula, you open yourself to that risk. Let me put it that way. Clearly, it appears that townships would lose. The estimate I have is that the park board does not have any need, and the park board would get very minimal, if any. Some of my experts are telling me you should allocate something to the park, even if it's $100. They question the fact of just eliminating them altogether. The down and dirty figures I have is the park does not have any demonstrable need. But there are other people telling me, nevertheless, you should give them something, just to. And Commissioner, you asked me how I've given you the concerns or I've given you the things that changed. As I said, I did not draft this formula. I have some concerns. If I were drafting it, I would, quite frankly, just to cover that base, I would give the park something.
That's too late. We can't, because everything's.
Well, if we give it out of our share, though, probably the rest of them will approve it.
Well, we can give it out of our share of the general fund, because this money goes into the general fund anyway. If we see fit to give an allocation to Metro Parks, we could do that.
Recognizing, I don't mean to be in disagreement with council, but if you do that, it still has to
Still
go
changes
back
it.
Yes.
and be voted on. So where the funding comes from is not the issue. The issue is a modification to this agreement will need to go back out, be ratified by Lorain City Council and all the majority of the members that have voted on it to bring it here today. That is the key element of what we're looking at.
And that could be pretty time-consuming, depending on when
To
they
answer the
meet.
Commissioner's question, if we turn it down, we run the risk that we would not get it back timely enough to do it.
So that pertains to all three of the items that are under
Yeah, if we
discussion.
change
It doesn't
this-
matter if there are 3 or 10.
Right.
If we make a change, we have
Or
to go
one.
through the,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right, we have to go through this whole process again.
Seems like we're in a box. Did
I
you
think
want
the
to,
county, may I, Madam Chair?
go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make a little statement.
ahead.
I think the county made a good faith effort to try to resolve this issue by putting forth the proposal that we did. And I thought it gave some starting ground for these individuals to finally talk about resolving the issue instead of continuing down the path of further discussion. So I think that a proposal was made, we approved that proposal, and I realize that it doesn't make everybody happy, and I understand that, but I don't think we're ever going to make everybody happy.
Did you want to address the issue?
If I may, Madam President.
Yeah, would you please give your name
Yes.
and the correct
My
spelling?
name is Terry Schilling, Shilling. I'm the law director for the city of Elyria. My address is 328 Broad Street, Elyria, Ohio, 44035. One of the questions that I want to comment on is this deadline thing. Keep in mind that what is before you is a proposed settlement of a pending case. Therefore, there is no absolute deadline unless the Board of Tax Appeals has specifically said you have to settle this case by such and such a date, or we're going to have a hearing and we're going to finalize the hearing, and then we may oppose the state formula. Now, I don't know if there is in fact a next hearing date and a self-imposed deadline by the Board of Tax Appeals. And the reason why I say that and why these deadlines may or may not really be that important is that if that case, remember, that is an appeal of the 2003 allocation, which was supposedly approved this time last year, but as I understand it, was never officially done. So I would think that if the Board of Tax Appeals finally rules regarding the 2003 allocation, that when they do, they're going to have an order to the Board Budget Commission saying, okay, this is what you have to do with 2003. And it may or may not be a settlement. So I don't totally agree with these deadlines. Now, the real reason I'm here is not to deal with that discussion. It's to go on the record involving the city of Elyria to let you know that we have passed an ordinance, it's our city ordinance number 2003-135, that I would like to put in the record of the commissioner's record on this, in which we are clearly stating that we do not approve nor do we adopt this settlement. And the primary reason for that is the city of Elyria, along with city of North Ridgeville, city of Avon Lake, and I believe 3 or 4 other townships, are not a party to this lawsuit. We are not a litigant. We are not an appellee. So therefore, we really have no vote one way or the other. But we feel that the Ohio Revised Code clearly gives us rights that says that if we're not a member of an appeal, you can't take money away from us in an appeal in which we're not a party. Now, your settlement is this, and to answer your question, Commissioner Vacy, the way I understand the 250 coming back is it's not a repayment, it's a keep of a future allocation. Therefore, there's no money going out, so you're not going to have any money repaid. The allocation coming next year is less. Now, City of Elyria is not a party to this lawsuit, but yet under this proposed formula, out of this 250, 80,000 is coming from the City of Elyria. City of Elyria feels that it's totally unfair to require us to pay a settlement going to the City of Lorain when we don't even have a right in this lawsuit. The proposed formula allocation, which you've talked about time frame, is ad infinitum. True, there is a code section that does allow a change process. It's my understanding this alternative formula has been in place since like 1983. That kind of gives you an idea how fast change moves regarding the alternative formula. And if it hadn't been for this case, who knows when this thing ever would have come up, but somebody needed money and they decided this was a way of getting it. So that's why we're here. So the proposed settlement is clearly ad infinitum. It goes on and on and on until maybe somebody. Now, Perhaps Elyria eventually, and who knows when, could be the majority populated city, and then we would have a vote. But I think that's rather unlikely. So we want to be on record to let you know that we don't approve of this settlement. You have the right to go ahead and approve it. There's no question about it. You have one vote, Lorain has a vote, and the majority of all the other entities have the other vote. And if you have that majority, the thing goes forward. What will then probably happen, and this is a question that is being debated among those cities that are not a party to this, is at what point in time do our rights kick in to deal with this whole issue? And I think it's when the Budget Commission, because here's what I understand will happen. The settlement gets approved, an order comes back from the Board of Tax Appeals to the Budget Commission, says, here's your formula you have to use for 2004. They adopt it, they tell us what the allocation is, we say we don't agree, then I think at that point in time those parties have the right to appeal. But that's what I want to do, and I would like to place this on record. Do I just give it to the...
Yes,
And I thank you very much for your time. I don't know, Mayor Hill, I think, might want to say something also.
sure.
If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, but I thank you very much for allowing me to speak this morning.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Mayor Hill?
Yes, good morning.
Morning, Mayor.
I am Deanna Hill, Mayor of the City of North Ridgeville, and like Mr. Schilling, I'm here to go on record that the City of North Ridgeville, and on behalf of the taxpayers of North Ridgeville, we do not approve this this proposed settlement. What would happen to the City of North Ridgeville, and like so many other cities around the nation, of course, we're in financial straits. We currently, in 2003, get over 3.4%. In 2004, it would be reduced to 3.11%. This repayment, proposed repayment of $250,000 from cities that were not even named in the suit, would impact the City of North Ridgeville to the tune of $58,200 in the first year. After that, after that $250,000 is supposedly paid by even those who are not part of the suit, we'd get hit with $32,500 each year.
Is that 32,500 less?
Yes, yes. It goes from what it is now is 3.42% to 3.11% to 3.25%. So this goes on forever, depending on whether it's forever or whether it's 10 years. We continue to take a hit. We can't afford to do that. And as mayor of the City of North Ridgeville, I have a responsibility and duty to the residents to protect our financial resources. As Mr. Schilling pointed out, this is basically going back to a suit to deal with the year 2003, when we were not named in the suit. And of course, our question is that legal? We don't believe it is. Second question I have, and I heard from another mayor who suggested that we might try to get an answer to whether that legislation that set up this formula that is now being used and has been used for 19 years without review, which was to be done every year, I understand, but there was never any review as to the appropriation and the percent. Was that legislation approving the formula 19 years ago ever formally adopted? I don't think we know. Our city council on August 5th, as an emergency measure, did adopt an ordinance authorizing the mayor to pursue any legal remedies to protect the city's rights and interests in such funds if necessary, and it was, as I said, an emergency. I will hand over a copy of this ordinance, and we will proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Is there anyone else here that wanted to speak in regards to this? Please
Yeah.
take the podium.
Thank you. I'm Neil Lynch. I'm a trustee in Amherst Township. I live at 8132 Oberlin Road. I also want to go on record to let the commissioners know that the Amherst Township trustees unanimously disagree with this alternate formula for the appropriation of the local government revenue assistance funds. We did send a letter that was signed by all three trustees to the commissioners as a result of the trustee meeting that was held on August 26th. The commissioners may not have seen that particular letter yet because I'm sure they get plenty of mail. So I do want to cover the points that were brought up by the trustees, some of which have already been mentioned by the City of Elyria, the City of North Ridgeville, and some of the commissioners' earlier discussion. You may have covered them all, but I have to apologize, I did get in here a little late. The first item is that Amherst Township was not named in the appeal by the City of Lorain, and thus we don't feel we were fairly represented in the final settlement, which thus the final settlement really comes down to this new formula. I'm not going to take as strong an objection as the City of North Ridgeville and the City of Elyria have in sharing the pain, because I'm not really sure why we weren't named. I don't know why Elyria wasn't named. I don't know why anyone else wasn't named. And I think that since it really comes down to our only decision is standing together as a majority, that you have to come back to that united you stand, divided you fall. So I don't think we should all be a bunch of junkyard dogs fighting over the table scraps here. I've heard the numbers mention the city, and I know everything's relative. Amherst Township, we're talking about $5,000. That may sound like a little spit in the pond. That's a big amount to Amherst Township, though. So we're not here really to fight that. We just don't feel we are fairly represented. From my recollection, the law firm that crafted this particular agreement provided 2 forums where we could even come and speak. And though we were offered the opportunity to speak, I don't know if we were offered the opportunity to be heard. The feeling that I did get from those other communities that were there that are so small wasn't the fact that they were gung-ho, love this agreement. The feeling I got was resignation. Resignation that there's nothing we can do. I disagree with that. If we stuck together, we could do something. The difficulty was the time constraint. This was provided to these communities in August and said, you've got to make a decision here real quick. And if you don't get a decision done, you may stand to lose it all. You know what? At this point, you sometimes have to decide what is right. Not only were all these individuals elected to lead, they chose to lead. And if you want to lead, then really lead and represent the people that you represent. What we're talking about, what we're all fighting about here is taxpayer dollars. This should be going back to the people that pay these dollars. And let's not forget that as we argue over our budgets and what our needs are. Let's always come back to that and decide what we can do. I want to review, though, the other items that were brought up. The proposed alternate method makes no allowance for scheduled reviews to determine future applicability of the agreement. That's been brought up already. But we all know that the demographics of the various Lorain County subdivisions are going to change. Lorain County is on the verge of good growth. And we know that growth is going to come from the major cities and the major population areas and go out into the fringe areas. With this thing not changing, not accounting for the changing demographics, there is no indice whatsoever to make any change in the allocations. You have to question the fairness and equity of that when we're talking about taxpayers, the people's dollars. And yet, as the people go into other communities or move, they don't get a return of their dollars, the money that they spend, that the government took from them to reallocate to pay for the services that they demand their communities have. Well, if they go into these other communities, guess what? We say, well, you're over there, but sorry, you don't get any. Go back to the community you came from because that's where the allocation's going to stay. The proposed alternate method commits Amherst Township's current and future leaders, and really all the subdivisions, and the residents and the property owners to agreement that goes on forever. That to us seems irresponsible. You've got to have checks and balances. You have to have reviews. We even question whether that's lawful to put the future communities in a binding agreement that can't be changed. Now, I've heard that, oh yes, it can be changed, it's easy to change. That's not going to be true. The reality is, for all the communities except the city of Lorain and except for the county, the only way you're going to get to this to change is to lobby the majority of your communities. And that takes an awful lot of time. And I'm not so certain the way this agreement is written if that's true. I know that's what it says by statute, but in this agreement, the way it's situated, I get the feeling that we are stuck with this agreement, and we are going to stick the future leaders of our communities, and we are going to stick our residents with this agreement. And I don't know about the commissioners, but I don't want anybody to stick me. And I certainly don't want them to stick the residents of Amherst Township and the future leaders. The proposed method assumes that the original apportionment of the funds was fair and equitable. If you look at the apportionment, what the crafters of this agreement did, they said, well, here's what you got today. This must be right, and we're going to commit you to this forever and accept this because this is good. You know, there's only one person I'll have tell me that here's the law and it is good, you will accept it, and that's God. And somehow when I'm looking at attorneys, I don't get a picture of God. You know, and sorry, Jerry, I don't mean this to you. It's not negative, but I don't put you up at that level.
I wouldn't presume to do that myself.
We've got another concern, which the commissioners are feeling right now. This agreement was crafted under extreme duress. We first heard this when the city of Lorain brought this forward, which seemed like their concern was there's an immediate need, an immediate problem. We can understand the strategy that they chose. May not like it. A lot of things I can say bad about it, but that's not the intent. But just because we're under that extreme duress, let's not run away from this. Let's not say that, well, resign ourselves, we got this deadline, we're going to do it. You know, this reminds me of competition. There's 3 levels of competitors. There's those that like to get in and play a game. Don't keep score. Let's have fun. Let's not work hard. Let's not practice. Let's not do what it takes. You get stuff, hey, you know, I got a bruise. Let's go out. You got the level that might do a little bit. They'll do the bare minimum. We've even got some leaders like that. I hate to call them leaders, but you know they're in our communities. They do the bare minimum. Well, I might learn a little bit, I might hear something here, and I might do something, and maybe I might get lucky and occasionally win. Then you got the 3rd level of competitor. On those competitors, they know what it takes. They have a drive, they work, they study, they practice, they learn from their mistakes, and they decide from those mistakes how to improve. When they're done, it doesn't matter if they come up against something that is too hard and better than them, tougher than them, they're going to say, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to do it. Nobody's going to tell me that I'm a loser. I'm going to be a winner no matter what. And they may pin my shoulders to the ground. They may beat me on the scoreboard when that final click of the clock goes off, but I'll know that that competitor left everything on the field and did the best that they possibly could. Now, I think the commissioners can guess what level of competitor I am. And I hope that's the level of competitor that the commissioners are. As far as I'm concerned, this is not a good formula for any of the communities in Lorain County, and I'm thinking beyond Amherst Township. And I wish there was some way that we can buy time or go forward to improve this. Perhaps we need a formula that has some sort of binding arbitration for the future. We need something that has indices for changing demographics. And perhaps what we needed to do was put the attorneys aside. Albeit all attorneys that are not in Lorain County, outsiders, bring the real leaders, the ones that are the level 3 competitors together, and put them in a room and let's craft something that's better for Lorain County. Commissioner Blair says you'll never get agreement among all. That's true. You may need some moderator or mediator or referee in there to try and say, hey, we've got to settle this. This is the way the score is going now, guys. And they may have to be impartial, but let's at least take the chance. I see this agreement, and it may have happened, but I don't know. I was never invited to any forum. Did anybody ever benchmark this agreement against any of the other counties? I've been told, whether it's true or not, but I'll take it at face value, that no other county in the state of Ohio diverts back to the statutory formula. They all have an alternate formula. Have any of the commissioners seen any of these other alternate formulas? We benchmarked this formula against theirs? Is there something we can learn from them? Is there something we can learn from other competitors? Is there some way we can improve what we've got? I never saw any of that. What I saw was, here's a formula, what do you think about it? Raised numerous objections. Opportunity to speak, not sure if I had the opportunity to be heard. And if you didn't get these letters, I brought copies for you again, just in case they get buried in those volumes of mail that you have, and I'd like to give these to you now.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks, Neil.
Yes, Mayor Hill?
Yes, President Vacy. Just one quick response to what the former speaker asked, and that is why weren't some communities named as in the lawsuit? My understanding from some of those involved in the lawsuit, and perhaps this can be investigated, is because based on the formula that's currently in use, which is determined by population and roads as to what percent each community receives, is that these communities that were not named as litigants or named in the lawsuit, it's because we have consistently not been overpaid, but rather underpaid. So that multiplies the problem, because not only did we not receive over 19 years due to lack of review the funds that were due to us based on population and roads, but now this proposal asks that we pay again, even though we have not received what we were entitled to based on population and roads. Thank you.
It may please the commissioners, there's just one more point that I want to make on behalf of the city of Elyria, and that is the dollar amount that the new proposed formula, how that would affect the city aside from the allocation of the 250. And as I understand that formula, based on 2003 actual dollars, the proposed decrease to the city of Elyria will be approximately 100,000, which, if the monies continue the same over the time frame, would be a substantial amount of money. So I just want to put that on the record as the amount of money. Yes, Commissioner Blair?
Each year?
Each year.
Thank you.
That's correct. Thank you.
Who figured this formula?
Commissioners, the formula on the, for lack of another term, the third vote was decided upon by the people that were leading that side of the House.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that side of the house in
You
the
mean
third vote.
The litigants, Sheffield Village, Richard Goddard. I understand that there was a joining of forces there. They agreed on mutual representation through a law firm.
And this law firm decided the formula.
Well, I believe that this law firm drafted this agreement that was subsequently distributed through those representatives to these various townships, municipalities, and villages that have signed off on it.
Mr. Schilling, did you have
I
something?
totally disagree, because I think what happened and how this thing got rearranged for all these other parties was that whoever represented one party, and the attorneys and the city of Lorain got down to figure out how they could give Lorain more and then take that chunk and allocate it to all the other parties, and that's how you got this new formula. Because if you look at this formula, Lorain is going from 16 point something to 22 points to 20 point something. And I don't believe Lorain County, other than the money coming up front, is going down any.
Mr. Schilling, you're completely and totally inaccurate.
Okay, then please educate me, Mr. Cordes. I would like to be educated as to how this came about, but am I correct in stating that the Lorain percentage is the only one going up?
That part is correct.
And that portion, or that increase, had to come from somebody.
Your statement that that the county wasn't changing is inaccurate. Everything that's being provided to Lorain is being paid for one half by the
Okay.
county. I also
And the
need
rest
to
of
point-
it's coming out of all the other communities?
one half.
Okay.
I also need to point
I
out for the
appreciate
record-
that.
I also need to point out for the record, since we're putting things on record, that the county is a non-name litigant in this issue, and the county's come forward and offered to pay $250,000 of a settlement fee. I also need to point out that our reduction in subsequent years is $320,000 a year to the county, and also that this settlement started at some place around $1.6 million and was negotiated all the way down to $500,000, and that in subsequent years, the city of Lorain's case, and I don't have a crystal ball, nor do you do, sir,
Right.
that they were seeking somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.8 million in additional allocation from the local government funds. So while clearly we're all distressed, and equally the county is, and so should Elyria, and we do respect our friends in Elyria, we started out with some very serious issues, and I think we've ratcheted them down to some parameters that are at least
Well,
better than what they were.
right. I understand that, and I appreciate very much you clarifying how this thing came about, because I don't think the reallocation was necessarily put together by the majority of all the other entities. I believe what happened was a small number of people got together, and then they said, okay, this is what we're going to do, and then they took it back to the majority. And that's what I was trying to clarify, Mr. Cordes. I also wanted to go on record as commending you, because it's my understanding that you had an awful lot to do with getting this where it is today. I don't,
I'm not
I
sure
don't
if
agree with
that's
the
a
city
good
of
thing or a bad
Elyria,
thing
but
right
I know you've done that.
But thank you, but I'm not sure it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well,
at this
in
point.
one sense it is, because it's my understanding, you're right, that the original over-allocation that Lorain was appealing was $1.8 million.
Yes, sir.
And that's been brought down to $500,000 that they want as soon as they can get it. And then they've also increased their allocation. Now, there's one other formula in here that hasn't been discussed, and that is if at one point when it goes to what, the county cities go to 81%,
Yes.
then the county formula drops to 30%,
Yes, sir.
and the Lorain formula goes up to 22.7.
Let me,
27.4.
yeah, let me explain why that was in there, and I think you'll find that interesting. I believe that the people on the third vote side of the House, I wish they had names for these folks.
The majority of the other entities.
Right. They didn't want, they were trying to actually, I believe, pigeonhole Lorain so that they could not grab off a even larger share at that point. So they were identifying them and locking them in. Should additional resources become available. That was not one of the parameters that was discussed either until this deal came out. And there was considerable consternation over on the administration and Lorain's part to be locked in at that level of the future allocations should the demographics change and the county be mandated to drop to 30% as
Right, which is really state law, is
Correct.
what's going into the formula. I mean, it's not a settlement by the county, it's just an adoption of what state law says you have to do if, in fact, the county municipal villages and cities